Well, we are back with another great episode. Michael, we have Robert Salas joining us
Robert
today.
Salas, yeah, legend in the UFO and UAP communities.
The fact that we get these legends to come on and educate us is an amazing thing. Although Katie can't join us today, I'm sure she's going to love this interview. This is right up her alley, especially with the presentations and stuff.
Documents, that's her thing. Yeah.
That
Bring
she's
lots of documents.
seriously, I don't know anybody like her. She is like to me like a role model of investigations, and I look up to her for like, dude, you think you know what you're doing. She's been at it for a long time. And Robert, of course, since 1967 has been actively promoting and talking about the nuclear problem with the UAPs,
Yeah.
and that's been a big issue. I'm not too familiar with it. I don't know if you are.
I know the stories. I've seen the documentaries. I've talked to a few people, but it's such a complex issue that I feel like it's something you could spend kind of your whole life researching and still not feel like you understand everything.
Yeah. And you could read books, you could watch documentaries, but I think the fun part of like even doing this podcast is to ask questions that you would have if you read the book or watched the documentary. Wait, what about this? Could you clarify this? And you get to do that in a podcast, which I find brilliant because I get more educated by listening to podcasts than I do watching a
Yeah,
documentary.
same.
Plus, I think it's the edit and the things they leave out. Like they're very limited on time, and so you can't really get that. And it's like,
The full breadth of the conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like a full meal. You know what I mean? Um, and then so we should talk about this. Contact in the Desert is coming really, really fast. It's just around the corner. We are April 1st tomorrow. So yeah, it's right around the corner. If you guys don't have your tickets, definitely buy some. It's sold out. I believe the hotel or the resort's completely sold out for all the rooms. And this is actually turning out to be the biggest one they've ever had. The who's who of ufology is going to be there. The beast from the east, Michael Lawson, is going to be there this year. Very active. You're going to be doing podcasts only with us, but with the anomalous review.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
We'll
and
be
you
talking
got
a
a
lot.
new. What's that, Michael?
I'll be talking to lots of people. Yeah, yeah.
Tons. And with the anomalous review, you do have a new series that's coming out, and it's about the SCU and encounters. Just
Yeah.
quickly describe that.
I'm interviewing members of this scientific coalition for UAP studies who have themselves had encounters with UAP, and they some of their encounters are really intense. So it's very interesting to be able to get to sit down not only with a person who's had these encounters, but who also has the sort of scientific background and knowledge to be able to analyze them in the way that people like us want to be able to analyze it. It's a pretty rare experience.
And you were mentioning to me that some of these people have had their experiences after they started
Yeah.
in their scientific or military endeavors.
Yeah, the you would think that the experience is what would lead you to have an interest in UAP, but in I think in all three of the cases that I've recorded so far, the people already had a prior interest in some in UAP or something very close to it,
Yeah.
uh, and then had this experience, which I think is fascinating.
Like our Sarah Gam interview with
Yes.
one of those people. And I think you were mentioning to me how she's like both left and right brained. It's just like a unique person, right? It's crazy. Okay, guys, we're going to be back with Robert Salas. You are going to enjoy this. He's got a presentation for us, and I'm sure we're going to learn tons. And we'll be back very shortly after this intro.
Are you paying attention?
Well, we've all heard about UAPs and nuclear facilities or their interest in our, I guess, nuclear capabilities at this point. There's been so many incidences. And prior to starting to record with Robert, I was saying I only know of Robert's case as being the only military personnel that has had an experience with a UAP hovering right above the base, just switching on the freaking nukes like it's nothing. And he mentioned there's a lot more people stepping forward, so we'll talk to him about that as well. But Michael and I want to say thank you, Robert, for giving us some of your time today and well teaching us more about what took place at Maelstrom.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always good to talk about this. I don't know why, but it seems like there's still people out there that haven't really clued in on these cases, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
No
And
doubt.
it's not just an issue of it taking place in the States, but the fact that it happens in other countries that have nukes. So China has had incidences, Russia's had incidences, and even England, they have incidences all the time wherever nuclear weapons are either stored or the launch pads, if you will. And to me, it's fascinating that they know all these locations and it could come and go as they want to. And there's nothing we could do about it. We have the biggest weapons on earth and there's nothing we could do about it. So obviously, Robert, will just ask you just a brief basically description of what happened that night. It was obviously around Christmas, so it must have taken you guys by complete surprise. But maybe just give a quick rundown for the listeners that haven't heard this story yet and will be educated along with us.
Well, sure. I do have the presentation up on my screen of what I gave to Arrow in February of 2023. I was interviewed by the Arrow Group. If your listeners don't know, that's the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, Arrow, which is an official office that was designated by um, certain regulations that were passed by Congress. Uh, uh, let's see, probably early on in 2022. Um, uh, where there would be a dedicated group to uh, initially collect um, uh, hist- for the historical record um, stories of involving the UAP phenomenon, UAP. But also, they're supposed to coordinate with other agencies to collect data. On that second part, I think they've fallen back or fallen down on their execution of getting that done. We can talk about that some more later. Uh, but at any rate, if you want to just me to go over it briefly, I can do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, just
Uh,
go through the presentation. Take your time.
or shall we go through the presentation? Yeah, I think that might be even better because I've got images here that would help.
That's like telling us that we have Christmas in July. So, yeah, let's bring it on.
All right. So first, these references are what I presented to Arrow. I even gave him copies of all these documents that you're going to see. The first one just shows that a fellow by the name of Mywald, and let me go back. Mywald and I were a crew uh, as of October of 1966. He was the what's called the Missile Combat Crew Commander. I was the deputy on that crew. We were both highly rated. We got high ratings as far as getting qualified for that. Uh, this is an image of the uh, launch control facility, which is this. Uh, you see this fencing area is what's called the launch control facility,
Hmm.
and this um, capsule object down here underground, we were about 60 feet underground, is what we call the Launch Control Center. The missiles are not located at this location. This is strictly where uh, my, Colonel Mywald and I were crewed together and would be monitoring and control of 10 nuclear missiles.
And
So,
Robert, just a quick question on this. So this is underneath the ground. Is there a
yes,
specific reason why they place you guys underneath the ground as opposed to a building above ground?
yeah, this is supposed to be a hardened site. Hardened meaning if a nuclear explosion or any kind of an explosion occurred above us, uh, we would be still able to operate. We would still be operational. That was the intent. Now, of course, this was never uh, proven by an actual incident, but that's the intent.
Never
Uh,
tested in the battlefield. Yeah.
not exactly. So
And
this
where
is,
are the missiles that you were controlling? They're relatively close by.
yeah, I'll show you in a minute
Oh, okay.
in the next slide. Uh, but again, we had all the controls down here in this capsule area, and that's where we were located. Upstairs, we had about 6 guards, our security personnel, uh, and we'll talk about their duties in a while. But basically, they were charged with securing the entire facility from any interlopers. Okay, so here's where we were at O1, which is Oscar flight, and near the town of Roy, Montana, and that's about 100 miles or so from Great Falls, Montana. Malmstrom Air Force Base itself is located just outside of Great Falls. So the large dot was O1, and then you can see the O2, O3, O4. Can you see my little arrow?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So those are where the missiles are actually located.
Oh, wow.
So Oscar 2 is one missile, Oscar 3 is another. So we had 10 missiles in a kind of a circle around this central launch control center. They were about a mile or so away from our location.
Okay.
Same thing, you can see that there are other large dots here, and these are other launch control facilities that we had, such as, and I'll be mentioning E or Echo, uh, E for Echo here near Winifred. Uh, Same kind of thing. They had their flight missiles surrounding them there.
Hmm.
I didn't know there was that many locations with that many missiles.
Yeah, and this is 1967. So we had about 15 of these uh, spaced throughout the state of Montana.
Wow. Well,
And
that's news to me. I didn't know that.
that's just one state. Um, so let me play you a telephone conversation I had with Colonel Mywald, who was my commander that night. Um, and it'll give you a good brief.
Okay, so we got the audio up. We had an issue with the audio, but we solved it. Here's the conversation that Robert had with Maywald. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Mywald,
Mywald. Okay.
Commanding officer. Yeah.
he was my commander in the capsule at the time of the incident.
Oh, wow.
So here's a phone call we had in 1996. It's the first time we had spoken since we were working at Malmstrom in 67.
What degree? I don't recall. I just remember our side of it. Yeah. All right. Here's the sequence I remember. I remember receiving a call first, and the security guard said, "I've seen some UFOs up here flying around," and I said, "Forget it." I didn't believe him. I kind of hung up on him, and then a little while later, I don't know how long it was, maybe 5, 10 minutes, maybe longer. They called back, and the guy sounded real scared. And said there was one just outside the front gate, and he also said, I recall, that one of the other guards had gotten injured in some way. I don't think it was from the UFO. I think it was from trying to climb the fence or something like that. And then I hung up, or he hung up because he had to go. His guard got injured, and then I believe you were either getting up or I woke you up, and then some of our missiles started shutting down. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Is that about how you remember it? Right. We got some security alarms and yeah, problems at a couple of the sites. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sure glad I found you.
Yeah, that was a big relief to locate him because, of course, he was another primary witness to the event. He did talk about uh, two sites where we had incursions or lights. We had indicator lights on our panel showing that a possibility someone or something was trying to enter two of the launch facilities where the missiles were located. And so that's this next uh, uh, conversation I'll play now.
Any reports from their field about UFOs? So I remember the two guards that had gone out to one of the sites. Finally got back scared to death. We had to relieve them of duty. Yeah. Oh, you mean our guards? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, roving patrol type. Oh, I see. They had gone out to one of the sites. One of the LFs, and on the way back, they lost radio contact, and we ended up having to send them back to base early. I'm not sure what happened. I don't think they ever returned to guard duty. And what were they scared about? Well, they had seen these crazy things. Then oh, they did? Yeah. They reported that to you? They reported it to the topside guy. Oh, the topside guy, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, interesting, don't you think? Yeah.
So that was 1996.
You said
my mic was still my mic was still on mute. Robert, just to be clear, when you guys are in these types of positions, you're screened all the time. Your mental health is screened all the time. You guys are in charge of, nuclear weapons, so they want to make sure you guys are fit, not only mentally but physically. Usually there's always, they always retest you for all these sort of things. So the credibility, not only in your rank, but everything you had to go through to have to work there, this gives you major credibility because we always wonder where disclosure comes from. And it comes from people like you that have had incidences like this. And as this amounts, this is what we want. We want people like you to step forward, whether it was in the 80s or the 90s. If something like this happened, we want you to step forward. But yeah, thank you for that. Let's continue. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, you made a good point. We
check mark.
we were checked on a regular basis, and that's one of the records I showed you up there. That was our qualification check, but we were also checked on procedures in a test facility where we went through kind of a war game type setup. At any rate, I'll move on just quickly here and just stop me if you have any questions, please.
I'm loving this.
Yeah.
This is right up Michael and I's alley for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So another document I have is, again, from Colonel Mywald. I wanted him to put something down in writing, and this are the items he said I will stand behind. We were at Oscar flight. SAT means Strategic Alert Team, or the security guards, responded to our security alarms at Oscar Flight LF launch facility. They're directed to return and maintain continuous radio contact, which it was interrupted at some point. In other words, after they reported the UFOs over two of the launch facilities, they lost radio contact. And he says more than one went off alert, and that's why we had conflicting statements. Probably people might uh, pick on that. He wasn't, this is 27 years after the fact when we were talking finally again about this because I was able to get uh, the Echo flight declassified. Uh, but both he and I, and it says right here, we were directed to remain silent about the incident. We both had to sign non-disclosure statements, never to talk about this. So we were under that order. Um, we briefed the squadron commander, reported all activities at command post. Mywald was later assigned to the command post as a controller and reviewed a UFO checklist reporting, which is another indication that there were other incidents, similar incidents to ours, because they actually had a checklist for reporting UFO activity. Um,
So
we
this
got
this is 67.
67.
So that is kind of the UFO craze was kind of gone by that point. The 50s, they really went nuts with the UFOs, but 67 really wasn't
No,
as
well,
popular in UFOs.
let me just say that in 1966, and I'll go over it a little bit more, we had the Condon investigation began.
Hmm.
Edward Condon was actually signed, given a contract by the Air Force to do a study of UFOs at uh, Air Force facilities, uh, incidents that had occurred there. Uh, they said it was supposed to be a scientific investigation. It was not scientific. Uh, as Edward Condon, who was a physicist, he actually worked on the Manhattan Project, the initial project for the atomic bomb, and uh, and he also said this was not scientifically done. His study, uh, and there were other indications that this was just intended to be a whitewash by the Air Force, even from the beginning. But that's a long story. At any rate, I'll go to the next slide. This is a note or a email I got from a Sergeant, James Phelan, who confirmed that one of the guards uh, created quite a stir back at the barracks because he was the one that was injured out there at Oscar Flight. And it is his understanding that he aimed his weapon at the craft and heard that two stories. One, that it did not discharge the weapon and knocked him to the ground, or he did. I'm sorry, he did discharge and knocked him to the ground, or he attempted to discharge the weapon and was rendered unconscious. I believe he also had a hand injury. So
Holy crap.
this is a confirmation of what went on up there by James Phelan, who is another security guard that lived in the same barracks as those guys.
So
Okay.
this was at a different location, not yours, but another location. This gentleman tried to
No, 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 no. This was our location,
your location.
Oscar Flight,
Okay.
because what happened was the security guard upstairs during the second call said one of his guards was injured, and I wanted to ask whether or not the UFO had anything to do with that injury, and it turns out no, he injured himself either through the discharge of his weapon or he got something caught in his hand. Um, or he tried to climb the fence, which was barbed wire all around. So one of
Ugh.
those two things may have happened.
Imagine the panic you would have to climb a barbed wired fence. You'd have
Was
to be desperate.
Were any of those behaviors like in line with what you would have expected or wanted a security guard to do in an incident like this? To either like fire your weapon at something unknown or to like try to physically climb a fence to get closer to it?
Look, I'm not going to second guess what that guy did. All I know is they were all extremely agitated and frightened upstairs
Sure.
when he called down. Of course, they're supposed to secure the facility. And that's what I told them. Make sure you do whatever you have to secure the facility. Um, but in a situation like that, where you see a bright red-orange light about 50 feet in diameter, and it's pulsating and it's sitting right over you, your head, who knows what any of us would do?
Yeah, it's very hard to know.
You know,
Well, you
we,
guys are trained to defend against other humans, not non-human intelligences. That's a complete different tall order, right?
yeah, I'm pretty sure they were not trained for that.
No.
No. Okay, next slide. This shows that a crew by the name of Carlson and Fiegel uh, were qualified to be a crew in February of 1967. See, February 1967.
Hmm.
And they turned out to be the crew that was at Echo Flight. This is one of the documents that we got from the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act. You can see the declassified stamp up here.
Hmm.
So it had been classified, but this was a telegram sent to various uh, Air Force locations, including Chief of Staff, the Air Force. Uh, and it was sent out by SAC headquarters, Strategic Air Command. Uh, but it identifies the fact that Echo Flight lost all 10 missiles to strategic alert. In other words, they were no longer available for use. They were disabled, and they were lost strategic alert within 10 seconds of each other. And this incident occurred on this date and time. So this was March 16th, 1967. Um, and there was no apparent uh, reason or cause of the accident, and that's of grave concern, they say in this statement. Grave concern to this command because they didn't understand how this could have happened. This was a very reliable system. We never had multiple missile shutdowns for any reason. Uh, so let's hear what happened at Echo Flight, and we'll hear from retired Colonel Walter Fiegel, still uh, among us. He's still living, as far as I know. As recently as about a year ago, I communicated with him, and here's what he had to say.
Back and forth to base because they were doing maintenance on, I don't know, the guidance cans or something. And the maintenance crews were staying over, and there were security and maintenance on site on both, on two of the 10 sites. And when the first one went down, I talked to the security out there. They had reported this UFO hovering over the site, and I said, "Yeah, right. What are you guys drinking out there?" And we struck strike teams to both of the sites that have been occupied. And both strike teams, I didn't tell them what we had heard via the LF radio, and I told them to go to get within a mile of the site and call back in on the VHF. And they both had reported it too. So we had two maintenance crews, two security troops on site, and two strike teams all reporting it. Is that right? Yep. Do you remember any of the names of any of those guys? Nope. You don't?
Okay, any questions about what Colonel Fiegel just said?
No, I do have a question about what, if anything, you know of that could have this effect on your computer systems and the missiles. Is there any, at least at that time, known kind of technology or process or procedure that could render nukes, in the way that they were?
No, of course, we didn't know anything that could have done that. If we did, if it would have been part of our training, right?
Yeah.
They would have, the Air Force would have made sure uh, we knew about any such capability. I mean, we had above top secret clearances, plus we were responsible for maintaining the strategic readiness of these weapons uh, during the Cold War. So, no, we knew of nothing that could have done this, but uh, after the Echo flight incident, there was some testing done by Boeing, and I'll go over that. Let's see, I don't know if I've
And
got
and I just got a side question from something that you mentioned earlier. They were this thing was activating different silos. It wasn't just one; it was multiple, right?
all 10
So each
locations.
one of these silos are individually controlled, right? It's not just one system. So it would have had to individually control all 10 nukes at the same
Exactly,
time.
exactly. And the documents that we received uh, reiterated that and uh,
That
made
blows my
the
mind. Yeah.
well, they made the statement, the Air Force made the statement in these documents that I have that this was highly improbable since uh, it would have to do something to each missile within seconds of each other separately. Uh, Real quick, we did contact, or Eric Carlson was the commander uh, at that time for Echo Flight, and he confirmed that after I talked to uh, Colonel Fiegel here, uh, I gave Fiegel Carlson's contact information because I was able to get that, and he called him and they spoke. And Carlson here says he spoke with Fiegel the other night, and we couldn't uh, remember anything else other than what was told to you by Fiegel. So here's Carlson backing up or confirming Fiegel's story. Uh, I'll move along here, but I'll get to your question, Mike. I want to answer that question.
Mhm.
Uh, all right. So this is Ray Fowler. I don't want to get into the weeds here too much. This has about 37 slides.
Any
I'm
physical effects on the outside crew? I mean, you guys were quite deep on the ground, but were the outside crew like we've heard about people on military ships just being like in a daze looking at these orange orbs and none of them are doing their jobs. They're just like in a sort of trance. Have you heard anything like that from the crew that were above?
Well, like I said, it was a hard experience to go through for these guys psychologically. Uh, After we were relieved by a crew the next morning, um, we were ordered back to the base and ordered to speak to our squadron commander. And when we walked into his office, first of all, he confirmed that this was no kind of Air Force exercise. It was not an Air Force exercise of any kind. He didn't know what had happened or could explain it. Uh, but there was another man from AFOSI in the office with him who shoved these papers in front of us and said, sign here. These were non-disclosure statements, which we were both ordered to sign. After that, we couldn't speak to any of the guards or anyone else in the Air Force because we were under this non-disclosure.
So the very next morning.
Yeah, the very next morning. So I never spoke with those guys again,
Wow.
even though they called me at home and begged me to come and see them. That was the next day, uh, and I had to turn them down. But
They
yeah,
move fast. They
they
move
were
fast.
affected. They were certainly affected by this. Um, let me get to the answer to your question, Mike. Boeing did some investigation of this. They had a team set up to investigate the Echo flight shutdown. Now, we got the same kind of failure mode with the Oscar missiles. So just to clarify, Echo went down. Echo flight incident was March 16th, 1967. The Oscar flight incident was March 24th, 8 days later. But essentially the same uh, error mode which we were able to query was guidance and control system failure. Now, we had inertial guidance on these missiles, meaning uh, we didn't have a GPS satellite system that would help to navigate these missiles once they were launched. We didn't have any of that fancy advanced stuff. So once launched, the missile would use its onboard uh, uh, instruments and that we had, such as accelerometers,
Mm-hmm.
meters.
Old
Anyway,
school, old school.
well, yeah, they were gyroscopes, that kind of thing, inertial guidance. So it had to have some kind of a computer on board that would tell them if the missile was on track to the target, right? So we called this the logic coupler. It was part of the guidance system. Boeing pulled a logic coupler out of one of the missiles and did a bench test. So, and then they hit this logic coupler with certain signals, electronic signals, uh, and found that at a certain uh, voltage, at a certain frequency for a certain duration, they were able to, let's say, produce an intermittent interruption in the continuity of this logic coupler.
Hmm.
And they theorized that this could have been the reason the missile shut down due to guidance and control system, uh, a, a, a lack of integration or continuity with the guidance and control system. And so that was a theory that was uh, put forward by Boeing. Whether or not it was accepted or validated as by the Air Force is in a document which has been identified, and I identified it to Arrow later on. I've got that on audio tape, uh, which was a secret, classified investigation the Air Force did
Hmm.
on the reasons and all the details of the Echo flight shutdown. And so Arrow has that information, although they told me they weren't going to do much with it. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, but quick follow up is so it would require some kind of specific signal or set of signals in order to trigger this malfunction state, right? Was
Yeah.
there any theory or anything proposed by Boeing as to what would have created that signal?
Okay. Well, Boeing was later told not to issue a final report. They were ordered by the Air Force to do that. And the reason they did not want a final report by Boeing, which would have been unclassified, was they didn't want the Condon investigators to get a hold of it. But
I thought you were going to say they didn't want the Soviets to get a hold of it and know how to like disarm our nuclear systems. But that's interesting.
well,
They didn't want Condon to get a hold of it. Why?
The Condon investigation was a whitewash. It was intended to whitewash the whole subject of UFOs so that the Air Force would no longer have to uh, monitor UFO activity or report to the public about it. That's why.
Oh, and it would prevent them from being able to whitewash it.
Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. It would be such a substantial piece of evidence that it would have upset the Condon Report's ability to sort of dismiss everything that was going on.
exactly,
Oh,
exactly.
fascinating.
And that's part of my entire presentation, but I don't want to take up all this time
Oh,
with
yeah,
it.
yeah. But yeah, keep going. Sorry for the. Thank you for answering the question.
No, no, no problem. But one of the documents we did receive from the Air Force makes the statement that these were external signals that could have caused the guidance system to go off kilter. There was nothing internal to the systems that could have caused this type of signal. Um, and they also made the statement that this was highly improbable.
Hmm.
Highly improbable.
So, Robert, do you think that whenever they have possible versus probable, they always go with the possible? Because to me, it seems like, okay, well, it's probable that it is UAPs, but like, no, it's possible that it was a signal. To me, it seems far-fetched. And as an expert, as you are on these, silos and what are the odds that something like that could trigger all 10 as opposed to just 2 out of 10? Like, what are the odds that all 10 could be activated by one signal?
Well, uh, I taught mathematics for 17 years, high school math. I also taught probabilities, but you need data to calculate odds.
Yeah.
I'm not going to calculate any odds. But when I was in the worked for FAA as a structural engineer, FAA has regulations for the construction of aircraft, right?
Mm.
How they are designed and et cetera. And no catastrophic failure uh, should be the possibility or probability of any catastrophic structural failure with an aircraft, any loads it's liable to see in flight uh, should be greater than 10 to the minus 9.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If you know what that means mathematically, it's
Like astronomically small odds. One in a trip. What is that?
yeah.
A billion or something?
Math and I don't agree. So,
Okay. So decimal point followed by 8 zeros and then a 1. Okay. That's 10 to the minus ninth.
So it's one in 100 million. Is that right?
Well, one in, let's see, a million is 6, so 9 is a billion, right? One in a billion chances. Uh, so we use that kind of wording, though. We said highly improbable or uh, is equivalent to us in FAA saying 10 to the minus ninth.
Hmm.
Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it gets us somewhere in the range. But are you fairly satisfied that whatever Boeing's hypothesis was about what did shut these down, that is just how the UAP actually did shut them down? Or do you think they've just found
Look,
one
I
failure mode among many?
this is what I'll tell you. I have no way of knowing. I know there were various studies done by the Air Force for many years after these two incidents. I know this from other people that stayed in the Air Force and told me about other studies that were going on. I don't know if they ever came to any conclusions. If they did, They're in this report, this secret report, which we were never able to get a hold of because we asked for it, because they identified the report, but it was classified and would not release it to us. Um,
To me, this
so,
just reeks of another swamp gas
so
excuse, right?
all I can say is if if the UFO was able to send such a signal, they would have to do it through 60 feet of earth and concrete and then penetrate each cable system that we had. We had a 9-inch cable departing from our launch control center where we were to each missile separately. So these cables were about 9 inches and they were triply shielded from EMI, electromagnetic interference. So, and this was a relatively weak signal. Um, I've got the numbers. If anybody's interested, I can produce those numbers of what this signal constituted. Uh, but
You mean
again,
the signal that Boeing hypothesized, not an actual
well, it
signal?
wasn't a hypothesis. They did a bench test to show that they could interfere with the logic coupler.
Oh, sure, but it's a hypothesis insofar it's as they're
It's a cause.
suggesting
Yeah,
that that's what actually happened. Yeah.
yeah, it's a hypothesis. So
But
I
that's just
don't.
by omitting things because they're omitting the actual object. They're omitting the witnesses to the object. And then what happened to the soldier? A trained soldier
Are they
doesn't
really
panic
admitting
like
that?
that.
Couldn't this just be the thing that the UAP actually did to, like, they're saying, well, if something had generated this signal and it had gotten through into the cable system somehow, or wherever it had gotten to, it could have done this. Like, all they're saying is something would have had to produce this very strange signal. Um,
Exactly.
they're not trying to explain any of the other stuff. Like, I guess they're just not even like what you're
Yeah.
saying, Jason, is they're not even looking at all those things.
Omitting
But,
things.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but this could be. They're not even saying would they have an idea about what would have produced the
Oh,
signal.
that's
They're
Yeah.
just saying this could have done that.
yeah, that's the point here. They are discounting, the Air Force, okay, are discounting the testimonies of the witnesses. Myself and my commander, Walt Fiegel and his commander, and all the guards upstairs that saw this thing. Uh, None of that is mentioned in any document that we received. So basically, it was an Air Force cover up. And like I said, I think the reason for the cover up was they did not want the content investigators sticking their nose in there and writing it up in their final report, which they did not. And they had the opportunity to do that. And that's another part of what I go through.
Yeah, let's go. Sorry, we're slowing you
Uh,
down.
no, no.
But it gets good. Conversation gets good. The questions pop
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, these are incidents I have identified through my research that also involved UAP at nuclear weapons facilities.
There's
19,
about 15 of them from
there's,
45 to
there's
80.
about 13 that I know of from 45 to 1980.
Oh,
Uh,
weird.
the 1980 was the Bentwater case in the UK. 1945, Navy pilots not once but twice chased UFOs that were hovering above the Hanford nuclear facility. Hanford was used to process plutonium for the first atomic bombs.
And where's that location? Is that Washington?
Yes,
Okay.
Washington State, little town of Hanford.
There's a plutonium enrichment facility in Washington. I had
I
no
didn't
idea.
know that.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, I don't know if it's still there, but it certainly was there in 45 on. 47, the crash at Roswell. Um, of course, it was the home of the 509th Bomber Group. It was the only atomic bomber base in the U.S. at the time. So they had nuclear weapons there, of course. 1950s, multiple sightings at White Sands, 62, Ramey Air Force Base during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this was a B-52 base, uh, and loaded with nukes in case the Russians decided to go to war. 63 Walker Air Force Base. We have a witness, Lieutenant Jerry Nelson, who has come forward. Many UFOs seen over his launch facility. This was Atlas Missile Facility. 64 Vandenberg Air Force Base. You may have heard this one and this was Robert Jacobs' incident where during an Atlas test with a dummy warhead, a UFO comes over and shines what appeared to be beams of light or something at the warhead and make it go off course.
Almost like a laser, like 3 times.
Yeah,
It moves around the
yeah,
missile very, very fast. Yeah.
exactly. 66 Minot Air Force Base. Uh, and this was written up in a document. This is documented. All these are documented, by the way. They're all supported by multiple witnesses or documented. Again in 66, and this was David Schindele who had come forward. He's already given testimony, including to Arrow, about relieving a crew where all 10 missiles had been disabled by UFOs the previous night. 67, I already talked about my incidents. 68, Minot Air Force Base again, B-52 crew. And again, we have multiple witnesses to this. This is very well documented. But a UFO actually crushed the fence around the launch facility and pulled the 20-ton cover, missile launch cover, out of its position. 20 tons.
What is
How
a
do you
missile
fight
launch
that?
cover? It's just like the lid to the
Yes,
silo.
yes, that's it.
That's crazy.
How do you fight
19-
that? How do you fight that?
I've heard of that. That's crazy.
1975, again, Malmstrom Air Force Base. Many incidents reported by NORAD of UFOs over missile sites. 76, Francis E. Warren. Bruce Fenstermacher was a witness. UFOs over his launch control facility. Fenstermacher's deceased now. Aviano Air Base, Italy, NATO, part of NATO, a nuclear weapons storage facility. UFOs seen, and again, we had a good witness for that. 1979, Schosterberg in the Netherlands. UFO comes right down the flight line, shining beams of light, looking for storage facilities of nuclear weapons which were stored there. And 1980, Bentwaters case. So this is just a listing, but there have been many other incidents that
I
uh,
have, yeah, I have a
I
question,
could talk about, but some of these other witnesses do not want to come forward.
Robert. I have a question about your list. So it looks like every 2 to 3 years, starting from 1945, there's an incident that takes place. But you got 1950s to 1962. There's a 12-year gap there. That would be Project Blue Book. And would that all be classified if that happened? Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, would they have those reports?
Uh, okay, well, it, I don't have room to list all of the incidents that occurred uh, in that time period,
Oh, but there
but
are some.
there are some, and
Okay.
also Project Blue Book had classified incidents. In other words, which the public has never seen and probably never will see,
Makes sense.
but they did have incidents that were deemed classified. Um, uh, yes. Okay, let me just move on here. This talks about the Condon investigation. Robert Jameson is another man that can support the fact that all 10 of my missiles shut down. Do you want to hear this testimony?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Real quick.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Jameson. Between January 1965 and October of 1967, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base as a combat missile targeting team commander. Our main job was to point the missiles in the right direction. Also, we may be dispatched from time to time to a restart. In case any missile goes off alert, we have to restart it and verify the targeting data. In March 1967, I was on alert for dispatch. And that evening, I got a call from Job Control saying a missile going down in Oscar flight, go out and restart it, which was nothing unusual to this point. I called my team and I went down into the hangar. As soon as I got to the hangar, some acquaintances of mine approached me and says, "Bob, do you know what happened?" "No, I don't know what happened." And he says, "Well, a missile, a UFO, was sighted over Lewistown, Montana, actually over Roy, Montana. Lewistown's the nearest town of any significance. But over that Roy, Montana, which is the center of Oscar flight. And when that UFO, at the same time that UFO was over there, all of Oscar flight went down. Well, that was highly unusual. I went to Job Control to verify it, and yes, they confirmed it. And I was looking at the status board they have. They have a map of the whole wing. I noticed everything was green. All the lights, they have lights for the missile sites. All the lights were green except one corner in the upper right-hand corner was all red. All of Oscar flight was down. I mentioned to them that doesn't happen. He says, well, it happened once before, about a week before. A UFO was sighted over Echo Flight. About the same time, all missiles in Echo Flight went down. He says, other than that and this is it. It's never have happened before. Personally, I'm never aware of any 2 missiles going down at the same time, let alone 10. I also learned, UFO, the people in Job Control was telling me, that earlier that day, a UFO was sighted over Belt, Montana, another town in Montana, small town east of Malmstrom. And it went into a canyon. And immediately they notified the Air Force. We sent a team out there to investigate it, and sure enough, there was a UFO apparently at the bottom of that canyon.
Okay, so he's talking about Belt, Montana. And I won't go into it except real briefly. A truck driver was driving through Belt, Montana, March 24th that evening, and happened to see a bright light to the left. The light seemed to be pacing him at the same speed. By the way, this is the affidavit of Robert Jameson, the man you just saw speaking. Anyway, the truck driver saw this light. And it blinked at him. He pulled his truck over and stopped and watched as this light landed into a gully. The truck driver then called the highway patrol. Highway patrol came out and they both saw this object that had landed in a gully. They decided to get a hold of the Air Force. The Air Force came out and issued a report, and this is a copy of that report of what they did about this. But this was part of a whole bunch of activity on March 24th that evening.
Almost plays out like a Steven Spielberg movie, like Close Encounter of the Third Kind. Like that's literally this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were actually reports of UFOs over Malmstrom Air Force Base. They were seen on radar. They were seen by airmen, and well documented. All this was documented by one of the officers that was head of operations and also called a UFO officer because he was working with the Condon investigators. So it's all written up.
Just out of curiosity, what was the Air Force's explanation on that one?
On the belt sighting,
Yeah.
they never fully investigated it because they couldn't go down there with they're going to bring helicopters in, and it was too dark for that kind of operation in this gully. And by the next morning, the UFO was gone. So, but I have a copy of the statement by the truck driver. It's in my book, Fated Giant, at the back in his own handwriting. And it's a very credible report. And the Air Force considered it a credible report also. So, but that is how Jameson was able to recall what happened on, and we were able to nail down the date of March 24th because uh, the belt sighting was well documented in this report by the base operations officer of Malmstrom.
Mhm.
It seems like it's always taken place in the colder months. February, you're looking at the winter, December, March.
I don't know if you can relate it to that. I mean, we had incidents at Malmstrom in the summer in August.
Oh, didn't know that. This is why we do this, isn't it, Michael? Yeah. We keep learning.
So the colonel, I can't remember his name, the guy whose testimony you just played, he said that it wasn't uncommon for one missile to go down at a time. What makes a missile go off alert just by itself?
Well, at times, because sometimes the weather gets pretty bad there in Montana, we would have a power failure going to a particular missile site
Hmm.
because it was on Montana Power. Now, we did have backup uh, generators and batteries to each missile site. Uh, so normally the power would just switch over to a backup generator. Sometimes that generator didn't work and the missile would go down for a short time. So those kinds of things did happen from time to time, but not in these two cases. I can testify to the fact that we lost no electrical power at any time during my incident at Oscar Flight.
And all of Oscar's missiles were not on the same power supply then, right? That wouldn't be.
Well,
It's not like one power station could go down and then all 10 of the missiles would go down.
again, uh, if Montana Power went down uh, at our location, the power would be picked up automatically through a diesel generator that we had at each launch facility.
Right. And I guess I'm asking, is that per missile or is that for all of Oscar? Does
No,
each missile have its
per-
own?
yes, each missile had its own power source,
Let's see.
power sources, including backup generators and batteries.
So you'd have to have a failure of all of those things simultaneously in order to get 10 missiles to go down at one time. Like all of their individual batteries, all of
Oh
their
yeah,
individual
Yeah,
backup
yeah.
generators, and you're,
yeah. If
Like
it,
dominoes, right? Yeah.
yeah,
but
but nothing did go down. You can say that,
no,
at least power source didn't go.
not only can I say that, but it was written up in a document we got from the Boeing chief investigator for these incidents. Yeah. At any rate, I'm not going to go over any more of these documents. I just wanted right now. I'll just
Yeah, I got tons of questions. So probably
you got,
Michael as well.
you got other
But
questions, other things to talk about. Yeah.
yeah, so you've been obviously advocating for this for such a long time. And I was telling Robert Michael before he came on that we just celebrated our fifth year yesterday, March 30th. And, you know, I already feel like a veteran. I feel tired, used up, and shriveled, kind of like Bilbo in The Lord of the Rings. And I could only imagine that Robert is probably feeling that as well. But with the incidences that you know of that have taken place on the ground, in the 1950s, Eisenhower signed, well, pretty much an illegal document, but allowed the military, Air Force, to fly B 52s over big city centers like Los Angeles, New York, to do nuclear bomb testing in case they had to go to Russia. These B-52s actually had active nuclear missiles in them. I'm just wondering if you have heard anything related to incidences with pilots and active nuclear weapons on board.
Oh, well, yeah, the one of the incidents I identified was in 1968 at um, Minot Air Force Base, uh, where we had a B-52 uh, pilot, and they had B-52s there at that time in '68, uh, which had nuclear weapons, of course. We used to, Strategic Air Command used to have uh, aircraft in the skies at all times, ready to go onto their targets. I don't know if you saw the movie Dr. Strangelove.
Yes, one of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
comedy, actually.
It's a great movie.
It
I
is.
recommend it to everybody. But in that, they show that these aircraft are already in the air, and they go to a particular point and they turn around unless they receive a go code or a launch code to go ahead with their mission to drop nuclear weapons on their targets. Uh, but yeah, that involved a B-52 crew. In 1968, they were ordered to go over and get a visual on a particular launch facility that I described to you, where the fence had been crushed, and also the lid or cover of the missile had been taken off, a 20-ton cover. Um, and again, this is very, very well documented. A man by the name of, if I remember his name, I can't right now. There was an interview done of many of the crew members that talked about that incident. Um, and they were debriefed by a general officer upon landing, who told them what had happened at the site. Uh, Also, I've interviewed uh, a person that lived near Mather, I think it was Mather Air Force Base in California, another B-52 uh, base. Of course, they had nuclear weapons there, and UFOs were sighted there often uh, by this witness and his family. I went and interviewed them personally. I talked to the mother and other people there, uh, where jets were scrambled to intercept these UFOs if they could, but it was a joke because these UFOs could just run circles around our fastest jets that were protecting the that base, and that was in the 50s also.
It's like a laser pointer with a cat. You know what I mean? The cat thinks he's going to catch up to the laser pointer, but then it just moves so fast, you know? That's exactly what they're doing to us with these
Mm.
UFOs and our jets, right? Making us feel stupid.
I recently had a conversation with Larry Hancock over at the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, and he made the point that historically there's never been a moment where, since we've gotten air, since we've gotten flight, there's never been a moment where we haven't been encountering objects that could just wildly outpace anything that we've had.
Mm.
It's just sort of always been there. One question I have is I hear kind of lingering in the background of a lot of these discussions about nuclear bases and UAP encounters there, this idea that the point is to demonstrate to us that whoever's on the other side of the UAP can shut down our nukes for the purpose of like getting us to de de-weaponize, denuclearize, or not use them or something. And I've been wondering, from the perspective of a person who's in the military, do you think that that actually would have any convincing power? Do you think that actually would like change the calculus of how we or whether we are going to use nuclear weapons, just to know that something could stop us? It seems like there could be the reverse effect. It seems like it could make us more prone to nuclear saber rattling precisely because we think, well, we can't really blow everybody up. Somebody would stop us in the end, but maybe that's not the case. I'm kind of confused about what the purpose would be and whether it would work.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, what I think purpose of these objects coming over and shutting down our weapons. And I showed you a partial list of about 12 or 13 incidents where these UFOs came over a nuclear facility and either shut down our missiles or um, shone a beam of light on a weapon storage area.
Hmm.
And bottom line is, I think this was a way of communicating to humanity a message. And the message is, I think, it is very foolish of us to have these weapons of massive destruction. They are not intended to be weapons of war. I know they were used at the end of World War II uh, to get the Japanese to surrender, and that was accomplished by the use of these weapons. But uh, as far as you being a weapon in war, it would very quickly escalate
Mhm.
to a nuclear war, and no one would win that war. We would do untold damage to all living things on Earth, including us. Uh, and I think this is just their way of communicating this to us. It was not intended to, in my opinion, and again, we're just speculating here because I don't have any firm answers. But in my opinion, it was simply a communication to warn us of the extreme risk, which seems to be getting greater every day, that we could have a nuclear war amongst ourselves. We were obviously very warlike creatures, uh, and eventually we could have a nuclear war which would completely annihilate every living thing on the planet.
I think somebody said that if one of the new nuclear bombs that we have, which is far greater than anything we dropped on Japan, I mean, it pales in comparison to the nukes we got now. But if one of them was to go off in a big, major way and then the world gets covered in ashes or whatever, 99% of the human population is dead within a year. Or same thing if a massive EMP from the sun or, electrical static, like just annihilates our electrical grid, 99% of the human's population is dead within a year, if they can't bring it back up, of course. If it kills everything, everything needs to be replaced, batteries need to be remade. So we don't have enough time to do that. And it is a crisis. I mean, we're only killing ourselves in the process. And we got what? Over 10,000 nukes. You probably know this better than I do, Robert, but there's like 10,000 nuclear bombs in the world. And the scary
Way
bit,
more than that.
well, some
Well,
along those effect, but maybe Robert, I'm wrong.
well, the U.S. probably has total about that number, 10,000. We've got about
I was
uh,
way off.
operationally, we've got about 2 or 3 or 4,000 that's ready to use right now, and so do the Russians. The Chinese are in third place now, I think, and growing. They've got at least 3 or 400. Uh, France is another nuclear power. The UK, a nuclear. We have 9 nations in the world now that have nuclear bombs.
Right.
Two of those are at war with each other right now, and that is Pakistan and India. They're,
Scary.
they're fighting over the Kashmir, and who knows
So,
when it might be used. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, actually, I was going to lead to my next question, Michael. I think we got time maybe for 2 questions each. Is that okay, Robert?
Sure.
Okay. So it was going to bring me to the fact that now Russia, the United States, and China are using nuclear powered ships, not only submarines, but their navy as well. And we're seeing an influx of interest from these either underwater objects or UFOs. It's the same thing. It's the same craft, but they're constantly being bombarded with sightings or things under the water that go at 200 or 500 kilometers an hour, which is impossible underwater without destroying the ship. So, do you think that their interest in this is not only the fact that we got nuclear power in the ocean now, which could cause issues, but also we're in a tube or a ship with nuclear power? Do you think their interest is in us, or they're more worried about the weapons?
Well, both. I think they are would love to see us uh, get a clue about the stupidity of owning nuclear weapons. And nuclear power, nuclear energy has been a problem. We could point to Chernobyl, we could point to Fukushima uh, as th incidents that have happened that have caused a great deal of harm by pollution of radioactive material. Uh, and they are, I think they consider, again, this is all speculation. I just we don't know for sure, but I think they are concerned about our planet and our living, every living thing on the planet, including us humans. Um, and they would like to see us rise to a higher level of understanding or consciousness.
So better than us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that I kind of want to go back to this point of what the purpose of communicating this is and whether it works? Like, it seems like these activities don't, they don't send a message to humanity in general, at least not super effectively, because, like, as you said at the beginning of the conversation, most people don't even know that this is a real thing. Like, our channels of communication don't immediately disseminate when, to the general public when a UFO disables a nuclear base. So it seems like it sends a message maybe directly to the people working at the nuclear base, and maybe sends a message more indirectly to the people up the chain of command. But I wonder how persuasive it is. And I guess we could test that by asking, like, of the people who worked at the base, do you feel like you and the others around you had your mind changed by anything in this? Or did you, I mean, it seems like everybody already knows that we shouldn't be using nuclear weapons, that they're way too dangerous, and that we've like navigated ourselves into this position of mutually assured destruction by inventing these weapons in the first place, and that's like really bad, but it doesn't give us any way out. So did it have any convincing power to you? Did it change your mind?
Uh, well, first of all, anybody who's ever been in the military knows that they are not an independent thinker about the use of weapons. They follow orders, and that's what we were doing, following orders. Um, Let me just try to answer your question. I think what you're getting at by the fact that every year the U.S. government, or every 2 years actually, the U.S. government puts out, the Department of Defense puts out a statement called the Nuclear Posture Review, or NPR, Nuclear Posture Review, in which they reiterate what they've been saying since the 1950s, that nuclear deterrence is the very foundation of our national security. Okay? And they say this over and over again. So, uh, unless and until somebody changes that kind of wording, uh, officially, our Department of Defense claims that we must have a nuclear weapons program and must keep improving it and keeping pace with our enemies' nuclear programs as a nuclear deterrence from attack by other nations with nuclear weapons. In other words, It's a so-called nuclear standoff. Yeah. So, no, it's not going to change military minds in the field about these incidents are not going to change their minds. We will still continue to believe or think that as long as we have as many nukes as Russia, for example, we're going to be maintaining our nukes and maintaining our posture of mutually assured destruction, like you say, mad.
So, as a follow up question, here's the thing that worries me the most about the situation. Then, if if I believe, and I tend to believe that there's some other non-human intelligence on the other end of these events, and they are trying to signal something. Um, if the thing that they're trying to signal doesn't actually change anything, it seems to indicate that they're kind of stupid about how to communicate to us and how to have the effect that they want. It seems like they have a lot of really sophisticated technology and they're trying to send a message and they just don't understand us well enough to know that that message doesn't change anything at all. And that makes me feel worried because we tend to think that having technological capabilities that far exceed ours means that you're also going to be wise. But it seems like their actions demonstrate the fact that they're not wise at all, that they're sending kind of baby talk messages to us that don't actually understand the very complicated, game theoretic situation on the ground and how to actually integrate with that. Does that bother you?
No, what bothers me is not whether or not they're stupid about the messaging. What bothers me is the stupidity of humans. Um,
Well, sure, yeah, that's a foregone conclusion. I'm bothered about that too. Keep
That's
going, but I
that's a
just want
given.
to say that
That's
yeah,
a
definitely
given.
bothered about that.
Yeah.
uh, you know, I think what they're saying also in this messaging is that we uh, extraterrestrials are not going to come in and tell you what to do about this issue. That you, humans, are the ones that need to solve this problem. You're the ones that created it. You need to solve it because if we come in, well, what do you think? I mean, they'll be telling us what to do not only with nukes but other things, right?
Sure, yeah, agriculture and trade and
We become
money and all that.
dependent on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would become dependent. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not what we want. We want to maintain our free will. We don't want little green men telling us what to do. So I think that's part of the message, and, I, and that's what I've concluded, and that's why I keep pressing my message of uh, let's try. I know it may sound difficult, but let's try to get rid of these weapons worldwide. And we were actually on a path to do that in the New START treaty that we had with Russia. And this was back when Obama was in president. We signed the New START treaty with Russia. And part of that treaty said we were going to work towards zero nukes. Uh, you can call me on that, but you can check that out. We had that as an objective, and I'm still convinced that we can accomplish zero nukes. It will be difficult uh, now that we've got 9 nuclear states and no nuclear nations, but we should at least try to get there. Um, but going in the way we are now, proceeding with um, improving our nuclear arsenal each year, developing so-called tactical nuclear weapons that can be used in small wars is idiocy.
Yeah.
It's idiocy. It's stupidity. Highly stupid, if you want to talk about stupidity, because uh, eventually more and more countries will want to obtain the technology to build their own nuclear weapons. Uh, and we'll have even more countries. So this so-called nuclear deterrence policy is going to blow up on us someday. It's not going to be, it's not going to work forever.
What I love about nuclear bombs is that it's a primitive weapon because probably the stuff that they have now, they could kill an entire country and not decimate any trees or anything like that, just the population. Like the weapons that they must have reversed engineer over time must be insane. Way much more effective, doesn't kill the environment, doesn't kill the planet. And that's the part that I'm always worried about because technology and innovation always comes out of necessity. And if you're like, look, I need to kill my opponents, but I don't want to wreck my house at the same time, you come up with a different weapon.
Yeah, bioweapons or something.
Yeah, lasers, whatever it is, right? Even we had contact in the desert last year. They were talking about the military now has a laser pointer on their weapons that they can point at you up to, I don't know how far, but it's like a lot, like a long distance, 200 feet, 2,000 feet. And when they point the laser at you, they could communicate. You hear them, like put the weapon down. It's like, how is that possible? But they have it.
Targeted audio delivery and things like that. Yeah.
Blows my mind. My last question for you, Robert, is we keep hearing, and we were at the Washington hearing on November 13th. I was right behind you in line. I was the cutoff person, Robert, by the way. I was the last person who said, nope, you can't come in. There's the cutoff. I'm like, oh, man. But at the hearing, we heard about, and the question was asked about people who were injured because of either crash recovery or working at Area 51. And now we're starting to see people from Area 51 that all have cancers or weird diseases because of where they worked at, near White Sands. And now they can't claim anything because the military says, no, you've never worked there because it's all classified. And we might be talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of your brothers and sisters that, sorry, they gaslight it and you never existed. We can't cover it under VA. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that some of these incidents involve injuries and emissions, radioactive emissions. So I think there's a lot of evidence out there. And again, this is another good reason why we need to get disclosure so that these victims, I'll call them victims because they've suffered injuries from these encounters that remain classified, and that's why they're not being recognized. So that's another good reason because these are sacrificial people. They just sacrificed the secrecy.
Yeah, and it's not just people that are sick, but people have died. There's that police officer in Virginia that apprehended the creature, and he was dead within 24 hours of just being in contact with this biological entity. And this is the part that frustrates me. It's you guys have no idea what you're walking into. They just throw you into the mix and then wash their hands clean. It's your problem. Even that gentleman that we interviewed from the Rendlesham Forest, forgot his name, but
John
he has a
Burroughs.
what's
John
that?
Burroughs.
John Burroughs.
Burroughs.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yeah, he has a heart condition, and now he has to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for anything heart-related. They won't let him see any doctors. He's not allowed to because the incident happened from a UAP encounter. And there's got to be, and I'm just saying maybe people that are listening here that are part of this and have had this experience. And does that need to change in Congress? Does Congress need to start looking for these people?
Well, Congress needs to do a lot of things. I'll tell you, I'm really kind of disappointed with where they're going. The last I heard, Congress is going to have a meeting with David Grush, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and Arrow in a skiff, right? A skiff. And so that they can talk about stuff that's highly classified.
And it never goes anywhere.
Well, it never comes to us, right?
No.
It goes to a vacuum somewhere.
Yeah.
It goes into a black hole because they can't talk about it. Well, this is the wrong approach as far as I can tell. Um, those people are, first of all, are secondhand witnesses. They're not primary witnesses. If they were, or if they try to get a hold of primary witnesses, they have to deal with the classification issue. And that's what Congress needs to attack, find some way of breaking through the classification problem.
Yeah.
And that's what they're not doing. They don't know how to do that. I'm convinced that there is a highly well-organized, highly well-funded group within our government, which I call the UFO secrecy cabal, uh, that are holding these secrets, and they're doing it using the system of classification, and which they will not be able to crack until we change the way things are classified and who can declassify, et cetera. So what they're going to do in the next meeting in April is not going to help us at all with disclosure, I don't think.
Robert Salas, we thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We should mention, guys, that Robert is going to be at Contact in the Desert in May. So Michael, Katie, and I will be able to hang out with you as well. I found out that UAP Studies is actually able to do interviews there. So it would be nice to sit down with you for a few minutes and talk shop, if you will. And Michael, you're going to Contact in the Desert only with UAP Studies, but you're going with also the Anomalous Review podcast.
For SCU, yeah. So I'll be talking to some people there for that project also. Yeah.
That is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be such a great. I think everybody's there. The who's who of, is showing up. And then of course I'm going to add all the links for Robert's not only YouTube channel, his website. Everything's going to be added to the description below. So definitely check that out, Robert. I learned several things from you today that I had no idea. And it's always, this is why we do this podcast and talk to you guys directly, because you're educating us on the proper way of handling this. Even your slide, your presentation, dude, solid investigation. And, we're so honored to have people like you come on and give us your time. And you gave us like an hour and 40 minutes. So thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to promote before we let you go, Robert?
No, I'm again going to be available to contact anybody that wants to come up and talk to me. I'd be happy to talk to them and answer any questions they might have about this subject.
Love it. All right, guys, we'll be back with another episode. I believe Jacques Vallée is our next guest. And we thank you so much. If you haven't liked and subscribed on YouTube, we're going to send you nasty letters at this point. I think Michael is fed up. The gorgeous beast from the East is tired of it.
Tired of your not subscribing.
It's done. We're done. Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. And we'll see you guys soon.